What's good, people? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. It's your boy Demi, and I'm back with another video. Today I'm going to be talking about 5 red flags when dating a potential partner. Now, of course, I'm a Christian guy. I'm talking about things from my perspective. I'm not God. I don't profess to have like a perfect opinion, so I suspect some people might get tense based on some of the things I'll say, but I just need to put a disclaimer out there that this is just my perspective. So you know we live in cancel culture and offense culture, so if you disagree, that's fair, but I'm just expressing how I feel. You get me? So yeah, we're going to be discussing 5 things that I think are major red flags that need to be avoided if possible when looking for a potential partner. Now, before we go into that, I want you to smash the like button, subscribe, share this with somebody, and also feel free to comment. I'll be keen to see what your thoughts are. Do you agree? Do you disagree with what I've said? Anyway, the first major red flag for me is simulation girls. Like girls that simulate behavior in relationship. What do I mean by this? Well, you're a Christian guy, you love the Lord, you go church, fellowship, Bible study, you pray, and this girl that you've met and you're dating her does all these things with you. I mean, that was my situation anyway. And the danger is that they're doing these things because of you rather than because it's something that they want to do, right? The danger is that you're the primary reason why they're doing it rather than God being the primary motivating force. We have to draw a distinction between the Holy Spirit that dwells in the believer and produces in them the desire to do things that pleases God, and the flesh that does things through human strength for human recognition and attention, right? So it's very important that what she's doing is primarily because she wants to do it. Now, of course, there's a lot of nuances to this point, because we know in relationships that, you might meet someone that's in a weak spiritual place, and, your influence draws them close to God, and they begin to learn to love and adore and appreciate the Lord themselves. But I think one key question to ask is primarily or significantly, is this person only going through the motions of Christianity because of you? It's a very important question to ask, because I was in a relationship before. I wasn't friends with this girl beforehand, so I didn't know how her life was. But when I met her, she would come to Bible study and pray with me whenever I wanted to pray, and go to all the ministry events and do everything I was doing. But as soon as we stopped dating, she stopped that and went back to a different lifestyle. And I was so shocked. I mean, obviously I should have really done more diligence myself and observed her and maybe spent more time being friends before being immediately involved. But the way she so drastically changed after we stopped dating, almost immediately, kind of indicated to me that she was simulating behavior rather than genuinely doing it herself. Does that make sense? She was doing it more because of me than because it was something that she wanted to do. And although it's commendable that, a girl would like you enough to pretend to do things because you're doing it, that's very dangerous when you think about, pursuing a meaningful relationship and marriage with somebody that they may just become exposed, some point down the line, for really not being in the faith, for really not having the heart of God, but doing these things because they think it'll make you happy. And I think a very important question to ask in line with simulation is, do you think that this girl would do the things she's doing right now if she wasn't in a relationship with you? And if the answer to that question is no, then you have to go through a very serious journey of consideration that, is a relationship the best context for me to relate to this person? Do we maybe need to be friends so that she can have a chance to grow and focus on the Lord independently? So yeah, that for me is a red flag, and that would be a relationship breaker for me if I found out that it was only being done primarily because she wanted to impress me and not because she had her own relationship with God. Number 2 major red flag is checkbox girls. What do I mean by that? Well, I mean girls that have their list of requirements and things that they want in a guy, and their attention towards you, their attraction towards you is more based on the things that you tick off as like things of status symbols, like how tall you are or how physically attractive you are, or your job or your ministry, or that you're a leader or that you're a Christian. Like, are they more fascinated with the idea of you than the reality of you? Are they into you in ways that are deep rooted and ways that transcend the volatile things of life? Like, my personality will always be with me. The way I am will always be with me. My quirks, my intricacies, that's who I am. But my job title, my ministry position, my social media following, like all these status symbols of status are volatile. Do you know what I mean? And the danger of somebody being attracted to you because of these status symbols these are things that come and go. These are things that are attached to me. They're not unique to me and they're not permanent. And I remember dating a girl once, and I remember her asking me, what do you do for a living? How much do you earn? And when you start to go into those kind of questions, it makes me makes me feel a bit of, can't lie, it makes me feel a bit unsure. But then the way she was reacting to my car and just the things I had, it really did bring my mind the question, are you interested in me, or are you interested in the idea of me or the symbols that I have? And although I do think it's perfectly valid for, a woman to be interested in a guy because of not just who he is, but what he has as well, I think it's very important to qualify that, is she primarily interested in you and as a bonus the things you have, or is she primarily interested in the things that are additional to you and her interest to you is secondary? Because what you'll find about checkbox girls is that they may have an inability to persevere in marriage. Take for example, you marry a woman, you've got a good job, you're 6 foot tall, you're handsome, you've got everything going for you. If you were to lose all of those things, would this woman stand beside you? Is she primarily interested in you? Because a woman that looks for a guy because of the idea of him or because of the checkbox that's associated with him may forsake him in marriage if the idea of him is defeated. When you think about the marriage vows, for sickness or in health, for better or for worse, or for richer or for poorer, the vows we commit to in marriage are indicative of the volatility of marriage life, that things are going to come and go. So it's really important that she's not into you for what you have, but primarily for who you are. So if I sense a woman is, that's into me because of the idea of me and the boxes I tick, that for me would be a major red flag. There was also a time when I was dating a girl, don't want to expose her, but I'm going to keep it as ambiguous as I can. But I remember she wasn't down with me until I got a job. And then when I got a job, like, she was very interested in me. We started dating, we started being very involved. And the day I lost that job, her whole energy changed towards me. Like, it was like literally the day I lost my job. The energy changed that day. And honestly, I thank God that happened, because it really showed me something about her, that she wasn't really into me for me. She wasn't going to ride with me, like, irrespective of what came. She was more interested in my financial position than she was in me as an individual. But the funny thing is, like, literally like a month or so after that, I got like another job paying way more money, and she kind of started to reintroduce herself back into my life. But at that point, it was very difficult for me to entertain her seriously, because I had seen, okay, in a situation where things go left, you're going to go left as well, if that makes sense. So I really lost all confidence in her and like the desire to be in a relationship with her. Like, we carried on talking, but the respect on my part was just lost. I couldn't see her in that way anymore because of how flaky she was. And she was really a checkbox girl. The third thing that's really important to assess is, what are your theological beliefs? What are your attitudes? Now, this might sound like a very technical, nerdy question, but this is a very important one. Like, if there is a big disconnect in your theology, in the way you understand Christianity, in your Christian worldview, then that may cause a lot of frustration in marriage. I mean, there's a lot of theological considerations that you need to ask, like, what you believe about the spiritual gifts. Do you believe in speaking in tongues? What do you believe about church offerings? What do you believe about the role of a pastor in somebody's life? There's loads of questions that you need to ask, and you don't have to agree on everything, but there must be some fundamental alignment about about some basic truths. Jesus Christ being God, the Bible being the Word of God. Like, if you don't agree on these things, then that's going to be a major red flag for you in marriage. Like, the Bible talks about how can two walk unless they agree. So I don't think you have to agree on every topic, but you do have to agree on certain key issues. Now, in relation to this, video, for me, one very, very important theological question is, how do you understand marriage? What is marriage to you? I remember speaking to one girl that used to go to an old church, and she said to me that marriage looked like her and her husband progressing, her husband increasing in financial well-being, things becoming progressively better. And she said that if things didn't get better in the marriage, then that was God's way of telling her that marriage wasn't for her. Now, for me, this is a fundamentally broken view of marriage. I see marriage as, for better, for worse, in sickness and health, for richer, for poorer. I see marriage as riding out the good times and the bad times. She saw marriage as a continuous climbing, going from one level to the next. And she saw that if you weren't increasing the level, then God's will wasn't in that marriage. Now, for me, there's an incompatibility of perspectives. I could never get married to somebody like that. I could never get married to somebody like that, not in a trillion years. There's just a fundamental disagreement. Now, some people are teachable or are willing to come around to different perspectives. But if a woman had a fundamental different perspective in a key area, especially in a topic like marriage, then I would not marry her. That would be a major red flag for me, and I'd be packing my bags and I'd be going on my way to look for somebody else. I mean, there's a certain question you ask, like, are you someone that's going to fight in marriage? Like, what are your attitudes to divorce? Are you going to divorce at the first problem? Like, these are the kind of questions you need to ask. Like, how do you view God in the context of marriage? If we don't agree theologically, if we don't see Christianity in the same way on key issues, then that for me is a red flag, and I can't marry you. It doesn't mean that I'm any better than you. It doesn't mean that my opinion is superior to yours. But how can we walk together in marriage if we don't agree? And I think it's better that you establish that at the beginning, rather than getting married and realizing that, wow, this woman thinks that marriage is just me increasing in more money and us being more blessed, and she doesn't understand that I could lose my job, that things might not go well all the time. You don't want to find that out whilst you're in marriage. So it's important to clarify these questions before entertaining somebody in the context of marriage. Do we see the gospel? Do we see Christianity the same way? And if we don't, I can't marry you. The fourth thing I want to talk about is antagonism to devotion and calling. A major red flag for me is if a woman has a detrimental impact on your spiritual walk with God. In other words, if you're somebody that prays and seeks God, and after this person being introduced to your life, your appetite for the Word of God reduces, your appetite for prayer and fellowship with God is diminished, then that for me is a major red flag. I've been in relationships where it wasn't because they were bad women or sinister or evil, but just the way they were, their outlook on life, the way they related to God, there wasn't that much of a desire for God. And that, in some situations, had a detrimental effect on me in terms of my ability to pray and be devoted to God. Like, the problem is with us guys, yeah, if we find a woman physically attractive and we're, in awe of her or infatuated, we might ignore the way in which she has an effect on our spiritual walk. And sometimes it's only when you realize that you've been with this person for, a few months, that you realize that actually I'm starting to backslide, to fall off, to not seek God in the same way. And it takes a lot of moral strength, a lot of moral fortitude, or godly fortitude, to walk away from somebody that's antagonizing you. And I know when you're that invested in somebody, it can be difficult to do so. And I find myself in a situation, I remember before, of a woman that was doing exactly just that. She was antagonizing my prayer life, my devotion to God, the way I was living. Not intentionally. She wasn't a bad person. Lovely girl. But it's just the effect that she had on me because the way she was pulling me back from God. And I didn't have the strength to end things or to leave the relationship. And God just took over and said, if you're not going to do it, I'm going to do it myself. And he really just ended things. But looking back on it, it was really a blessing that things ended. Because sometimes you find yourselves in situations where you either don't value or don't have the strength to walk away from a situation because of a number of reasons. Like, she might be a lovely girl, great personality, beautiful in appearance, but if she's antagonizing your devotion to God, then she has to go. She either has to change or she gotta go. She gotta go be. It's one or the other, do you know what I mean? But something has to give. I think by extension, a very closely related point is if you do have a calling in ministry, or if God has called you to something, be very careful of women that are antagonistic to that. Again, it may not be that, she's a Jezebel spirit or she's demonic. You might have, I for example, I've been called to a ministry called Obedience. I lead a Christian fellowship group. I, for example, have been called to a ministry called Obedience. I lead a ministry. And, there's plenty of young people. We do prayer calls, Bible study, events. Not every woman is interested in that. Some women are apathetic towards that and are not going to be interested in doing those things. And she might get annoyed that I'm spending so much time in ministry and cause arguments and dissension. And that's going to kind of antagonize my zeal for ministry. She might dissuade me from doing things I otherwise would do or discourage the zeal at which I do it. There's going to be a kind of woman that will encourage you and challenge you and motivate you and compliment you in ministry. And there's a kind of woman that's going to antagonize you and pull you back and cause arguments and complain that you're spending so much time on this thing that God has called you to do. It doesn't mean she's evil at all. But a major red flag is the kind of woman that will antagonize your calling. If God has called you to do a specific task, it is very helpful, though not essential, to have somebody that is complementary to it. But at the very minimum, try to avoid marrying someone or pursuing someone that is antagonistic to the calling that God has given you. Not everyone by design has an interest in what you want to do. Some people, she loves the Lord, she's God-fearing, she's just not interested in your ministry, and that's fine. Being God-fearing doesn't mean a woman's going to be interested in what God has called you to do. But if she's antagonistic to your calling, if she has no interest and she's very apathetic to what God has called you to do, that for me would be a major red flag. Because, well, I don't know about you, but in my personal life, my God-given calling is something that's very dear to my heart, and I would never want to compromise that calling for the sake of a woman. Though I have definitely been in situations where, because I was just so infatuated and interested in a woman, I was allowing my ministry focus to be antagonized. But yeah, that's a major red flag to avoid. Don't allow a woman to antagonize your devotion to God or your calling. Okay, so the final thing that would be a red flag for me would be if a woman indicates to me that she's not going to be submissive in marriage. Now, this is a very contentious one because, of course, there's a lot of debate about what submission is, how is submission practically applied in marriage, and there's a lot of women that just don't like the idea of submission. But there's a very clear biblical instruction for the husband to love his wife and the wife to be submitted to the husband. Now, I think it's very important, first of all, to define and qualify what does submission mean. Well, the Greek word for submission is hupotasso, and it means to arrange under, to subordinate, to subject, to put in subjection, to subject oneself, obey, to submit to one's control, to yield to one's admonition or advice, to obey, to be subject. The biblical argument is that the man is the head of the woman and Christ is the head of the man. In other words, the man has a leadership responsibility that he uses to lead both himself and the wife in marriage for the sake of promoting godliness, unity, protection, the fruit of the Holy Spirit. This leadership role is really one of servitude to his wife. But in order for that leadership role to be facilitated, there's certain qualities that a woman simply just can't have. So yeah, I think for me, a few deal breaking qualities in line with the point I just made would be not being teachable, somebody that doesn't really listen, arrogant, argumentative, disrespectful, condescending, like those kind of qualities. If I saw that in a woman, then I'd be really asking myself, does this woman have the ability to submit in the context of marriage? Now, I understand there's been all kinds of abuses of submission. There's been a lot of bad examples. A lot of women have been brought up in households where they've seen submission done badly. But there's still a very clear biblical instruction for it to be done. And that is God's desire and design for a Christian household. So if I perceive in a woman that she doesn't have the ability to submit, then that for me would be a big deal breaker. And for me, bros, I would consider that one a red flag. Do you know what I mean? And we can have all kinds of debates about what submission means. I mean, you don't have to be submitted to me, but if you don't show those qualities, I wouldn't marry you personally. And one thing important I have to say is that the obligation to submission only begins when you're married. Like, a woman is not obligated to submit to a man that she's not married to. But I do think it's important to see her qualities and attributes and ask yourself the question, when the time does come for marriage, does she show me today that she'll be able to submit tomorrow? And if the answer to that question is no, then that for me is a red flag, and you would do well to question whether she is marriage material for you. Maybe she will submit to somebody else and she won't submit to you. But if she's not going to submit to you, you do well to ask yourself, can I really marry this woman? Okay, with that being said, I feel like I've probably caused a lot of trouble. But one thing I do want to qualify is that, red flags don't necessarily disqualify somebody. When I say red flags, I'm talking about things that make you think more deeply, should I marry this person? Now, somebody might show a red flag and you might still decide to marry them. But, that's really your choice. I think my responsibility to you in this video is really highlighting things that will make you think critically that, this person possesses this quality, is it really a good decision to marry them? And if after making that deliberation, you decide to get married to them anyway, then as you've made your bed, lie in it. Just understand that obviously these red flags come with certain implications. But if you can go on a journey with your partner to speaking through these problems and talking about them and coming to biblical compromises and growing together, then I think that's important, because nobody's perfect. No woman or man has it all figured out. And I think if you do meet somebody that's teachable, somebody that listens, somebody that's willing to engage in conversation with you, then you can really overcome all of these problems. Communication is so key to growth and commitment and faithfulness in the context of relationships. So really, if you find a woman that ticks one or more of these red flags, but she listens, she communicates, she expresses her viewpoint, she's willing to grow and challenge herself, then for me, it's not really an issue. Do you know what I mean? Everything can be overcome. But, in isolation, these are still red flags. And if you do see them, you should have conversations about them. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts are. Do you agree? Do you disagree with what I said? Are there any other red flags that you would like to, comment on or introduce to the conversation? Feel free to drop a comment below. I'd be keen to hear your opinions. But on that note, like, share, subscribe, and I will try to come with, a lot more content more consistently. But on that note, until next time, peace.